Do you have any comments about the fact that 87th Avenue does get you the U of A as a station option, whereas the Stony Plain does not? And do you see, for the first route for West End, because I suppose in my mind I kind of see two possibilities, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, when I sent out my very long email about a week ago, I mentioned I think a route to the university will happen at some point. What concerns me, where I hesitate to support 87th Ave right now is that although supposedly the administration has acknowledged it, I don't feel there's going to be a lot of new ridership. I took the number 4 and the 106 for 4 years to the university. Those buses were packed. But if we're shifting those people from one method of transit to another, are we getting any more people out of their cars? That's why I hesitate to support the 87th Ave route as my primary option. But I think it makes a route to the university will happen at some point, but I don't think it's a priority.
So you would prefer to see the Stony Plain route as the main route to start off with? Mm-hmm. And 87th Avenue is a secondary option?
87th Avenue, or like the South Campus, something like that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I see no further questions. Thank you. Our next speaker, Beth Sanders, I understand has left. Is Brian LeGros here? And Albert Opstad is later. Brian or Marjorie Staples? No, thank you. Then Mr. Kent.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is David Kent. I'm the managing partner of Strathern Heights. I would like to assure Council that Strathern Heights is alive and progressing, and contrary to Mrs. Wynick, is not speculative. We are moving ahead. We are enthusiastically in favor of the proposed route, and I'd only wish that this conversation and proposal would come forward some 2 to 3 weeks earlier, because just last week we received LEED Silver neighborhood designation, and had this station been there, we were 3 points short of gold. It would have tipped the balance. So that just gives you an idea how closely aligned we are with public transit already with our design. I'd like to congratulate administration for the holistic approach to a long-term integrated plan for the future of this city. We see tremendous benefits, certainly in predictability and frequency, critical mass in terms of coverage of the city, which will lead to greater ridership with all its intended benefits. So again, we are enthusiastic support both of the south routing and the west routing. I will be very brief. The presentation by administration mentioned the Bridgelands as one of its 2 examples of transit-oriented development. I would remind Council that that design was done by Jeremy Sturgis, who also did our master plan that just received another award. So, in conclusion, the devil will be in the details, as many of the speakers have said today, but we are more than prepared, willing to work with administration as to whether it's a right turn, left turn, or how the actual details will function with the new 88th Street, but I don't believe it will split the community of Strathern, as was alluded to earlier in the mentioning of the Belgrade extension. This is an entirely different system, and people should be very careful to look and pay attention to these details, because we think that it is a super system, and it is a sensitive system for a mature neighborhood and for redevelopment. So, in conclusion, we think it's a win for the city. It's certainly a win for ourselves, and I believe it's a win for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kent, and congratulations on your silver lead. That's wonderful. Councillor Sloan has questions of you. Councillor Sloan?
Thank you. And also congratulations to you.
Thank you, Councillor.
My questions to you are general ones because I believe you're the only developer that is registered to speak at these hearings that I know of.
And by way of disclosure, I own property on 144th and Stony Plain, so.
Okay, very good. Your development and the development at Century Park are examples of TOD that were proposed, approved, and in construction before the deliberation about these lines. But the question I want to ask you is it worthy to build a line on the premise of speculative development, which the Stony Plain Road route is entirely, we're speculating that development will originate at some juncture along that route if we build it there, versus how we've approached the south route with Century Park and potentially your development on the east route?
Well, I would answer that to the affirmative, yes. If you look at the Century Park, it was built with the promise that the LRT would come down there, and that's why the density and it started. Our development was built with transportation in mind and walkability in mind. That's why it has received its LEED designation. And in the workshops that I was, and the public meetings that I was involved in, your consultant from Portland felt that in mature neighborhoods to achieve approximately 75% of the proposed guidelines for TOD was a huge win, and they would consider that in Portland. We went back and reevaluated our own in terms of the short blocks that we created and the other things that they're looking for. We scored 85%. So we were already looking forward and contemplating transportation, bus in this case, not LRT, but we were designing for transportation 3-4 years ago. So if you now have the certainty of a routing, then yes, I would say it would spur my industry.
You were able to make the economic case for your development without the LRT, because at the time you came forward, there was no commitment.
That is correct.
And I guess the question and the unease I have is why we don't see more transit-oriented development by developers in advance of these kinds of deliberations. I have not seen any figures that substantiate there is a market, there will be a market for this type of development in Edmonton for maybe 50 years. We have the municipal airport lands, which we are proposing to subdivide and parcel, and we also have said we want to redevelop the quarters and also provide density bonusing for those lands. So if you take those two, who's to say Stony Plain Road will be an attractive destination for any developer? Well, and how do you, if you were in our shoes, how do you justify making a decision when you really can't for certain see the taxpayers' money going for good use to build that investment when clearly, economically, the development may not come there for quite some time?
You're talking about the LRT may take anywhere from 5 to 20 years to kick off.
Well, I think it'll be more than that, because I think the municipal airport and the quarters lands, if you just consider the Nate line, or even if we built the very first part of the southeast line, those two make more sense than developing at Stony Plain Road. If I were a developer, I'm just saying.
But I think then you're losing all the intrinsic value that you create in a mature neighborhood, and that kind of development, it cannot be induced just by design. So I would argue that McKinnon Ravine and other extraneous factors would be what would be the tipping point for Stony Plain versus not say the quarters, because some of those elements exist there, but say the airport lands.
Okay, and then just help me. We would build a route and hope they come versus building a route that would connect us, say, to the University of Alberta, which even in its current form or in its future form in the Southeast Campus is clearly an economic driver of our city, both presently and in the future. that, how do you distinguish between those, the route going there versus...